Welcome to csstudents.com, a learning portal for company secretary students. New concepts under the Companies Act, 2013. The Companies Act 2013 has introduced various new concepts in Indian corporate laws. Corporate social responsibility is one of them, and well known as CSR. In this presentation, we would discuss the concept of CSR, legal provisions and compliances. Before we discuss the legal provisions, let's understand the concept first. As we know that, the main object of any company is to maximize the shareholders' wealth. This maximization works in the form of appreciation in the share value. More the share value, more the wealth created for the shareholders. Some people may say that more profits would result in appreciation in share value. But that is not entirely true. In today's time, share appreciation depends on various factors, such as, the most important factor is, definitely profits. Then the quality of management, efficiency in operations, conservation of resources and innovations. But concept of corporate social responsibility is way ahead of that. We need to understand that maximization of shareholders' wealth may be the main object of corporates. But it's not the only object. As per the modern thinking, the part of business resources should be used for social welfare. Companies cannot have a limited perspective of earning profits. There has to be a greater good of society. It could be in the form of improvement of environment, uplifting of socially backward classes, or improved education or health facilities. Let's take an example. X Limited is planning to establish a new plant in a backward region. There are no healthcare facilities in that area. X Limited, together with the plant construction, also constructs a hospital for locals. Such hospital can provide healthcare services to the people residing near the plant. X Limited can fund part of hospital's running expenses, so that people around can get healthcare services at a cheaper price. Similarly, X Limited can establish a school, which can provide education facilities to the children living in the surrounding area, where plant is located. Now if we look at the benefits of the hospital, or the school, which X Limited proposes to construct. Initially, for establishing a hospital, or school, X Limited may have to incur a cost. X Limited will also have to incur running expenses of the hospital or the school, for which X Limited may not get any immediate or short-term benefits. These expenses will actually reduce the profits of X Limited. But in long run, because of the hospital, X Limited can get healthy workforce from the local area where plant is going to be located. With a school, X Limited would get a literate workforce. If these two initiatives were not taken, X Limited will always have to look for outside workforce. For workers coming from outside, X Limited may have to construct accommodations and make other arrangements. So to get a broad definition, we can say that the CSR activity involves incurring a short-term costs that do not provide an immediate financial benefit, but instead promote positive social and environmental changes. In India, many bigger companies have been involved in CSR activities. But, so far those activities were limited to voluntary efforts. But under the Companies Act, 2013, CSR became mandatory for certain class of companies. The basic change brought by Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. It makes mandatory for certain class of companies to spend not less than 2% of their average net profit for CSR activity every year. For example, if X Limited has an average net profit of 100 crore, it has to mandatorily spend 5 crore on CSR activity. Schedule 7 of the Act lists out various activities which shall qualify as CSR activity, for the purpose of compliance of the Act. Means, the companies covered under the ambit of CSR will have to indulge in any of those activities to comply the law. Mandatory CSR provisions are one of the biggest impact of the new Companies Act. It talks about the mandatory spending for CSR activity from companies' profits. Although there was a huge reluctance from corporates over this provision, but government went ahead to enact it. Subsequently, the government also issued CSR rules which provide further requirements and compliances. Now we discuss the legal provisions. The first one is Section 135. Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013 is the main provision on the corporate social responsibility. Section 135 puts the obligation on the companies to spend on CSR activity. Schedule 7 of the Companies Act 2013 provides the list of various CSR activities. The Companies Act and the Companies Corporate Social Responsibility Rules 2014. These rules provide further compliance for CSR activities. Section 135 of the Companies Act is the male section CSR. Subsection 1 of Section 135 provides the criteria of companies on which CSR provisions are applicable. So CSR provisions are applicable on companies whose net worth is Rs 500 crore or more in any financial year. So, take the balance sheet, calculate the net worth and determine whether CSR provisions are applicable. Now the question is, what is the definition of net worth for this purpose? Section 2 subsection 57 provides the definition of net worth. As per this section, the net worth means the aggregate value of the paid-up share capital, and all reserves created out of the profits and securities premium account, after deducting the aggregate value of the accumulated losses, deferred expenditure and miscellaneous expenditure not written off as per the audited balance sheet, but does not include reserves created out of revaluation of assets, write-back of depreciation and amalgamation. The second criteria is turnover. The companies having turnover of Rs 1000 crore or more will also be covered under CSR net. The third criteria is net profit. Company having net profit of Rs 5 crore or more during any financial year shall be in CSR ambit. CSR provisions are also applicable on foreign companies having place of business in India and falling in any of the above criteria. So, if the company is covered under any of the discussed criteria, then that company will have to comply with certain provisions. First one is to constitute the Corporate Social Responsibility Committee of the Board. Following are the provisions applicable on the CSR Committee. The CSR Committee shall have at least 3 directors. The CSR Committee shall have at least 1 independent director. Section 149 and rules made thereunder make it mandatory for certain public companies to appoint independent directors. However, CSR rules makes it clear that, if a company is not required to appoint independent director, under Section 149, then, CSR committee of that company can be constituted, without an independent director. Additionally, in case of private companies having only 2 directors, such private company shall constitute CSR committee with only 2 directors. Foreign companies having place of business in India and covered under the CSR criteria, shall also constitute the CSR committee. The CSR committee shall discharge the following responsibilities: formulate and recommend to the board a corporate social responsibility policy, which shall indicate the activities to be undertaken by the company, as specified in the Schedule 7. The next responsibility is to recommend the amount of expenditure to be spent by the company on the CSR activities. The third one is to monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. The CSR committee shall also institute a transparent mechanism for implementation of CSR projects or programs and activities undertaken by the company. Every company following CSR ambit shall frame its corporate social responsibility policy. The CSR policy shall include a list of CSR projects or program which the company plans to undertake. These programs should fall within the preview of the activities mentioned in the Schedule 7 of the Act. The CSR policy shall also provide the modalities of execution of such projects and program, and an implementation schedule. The policy shall also provide the monitoring process of such projects and programs. Further, the CSR policy should clearly provide that any surplus arising from the CSR projects and program shall not be part of company's business profits. However, any CSR activity should not include the activities undertaken by the company in the normal course of business. From procedural perspective, as first step, the CSR committee should frame a CSR policy and recommend it to the board. The board shall approve this policy and will ensure the implementation of this policy. Now, we would discuss the provisions relating to CSR activities. As discussed earlier, a list of permissible CSR activities have been provided in the Schedule 7 of the Companies Act. After the enactment of the Act, this schedule has been amended once by adding more activities to this. We would discuss the schedule later. First, we understand the provisions mentioned in the rules about the CSR activities. The Rule 4 of the CSR rules provides that the company shall undertake the CSR activities in accordance with the CSR policy. But the condition is, these activities should not be part of the company's normal course of business. For example, a construction company cannot indulge in the construction of houses as CSR activity. As per the last point, the policy should provide that any surplus arising from the CSR activity shall be used only for the further CSR activity and not as company's profits. So CSR activity cannot be run as commercial activity for profits. In the earlier part of this presentation, we discussed that the companies covered under CSR ambit will have to spend at least 2% of their 3 years' average profits on CSR activities. So, what qualifies CSR expenditure to comply with that requirement? As per Rule 7, CSR expenditure would include all the expenditures including contribution to corpus for projects and programs relating to CSR activity, as approved by the Board of Directors, on the recommendation of the CSR Committee. However, CSR expenditure would not include any expenditure on any item which is not in conformity or not in line with activities which fall within the preview of the Schedule 7. Reporting of CSR activity. As per Rule 8 of the CSR rules, the board report shall have an annual report on company's CSR activities. The format of such report is provided in the annexure to the CSR rules. Now, we would discuss what all activities are covered under Schedule 7. Schedule 7 of the Act provides a list of various CSR activities. The schedule was amended once to add additional activities. The company falling within the ambit of CSR can undertake any of these activities to fulfill its obligation under CSR provisions. So, the first is any activity for eradicating hunger, poverty, and malnutrition, promoting preventive health care and sanitation, and making available safe drinking water. For example, X Limited installs a water purification plant in a village and puts the pipeline. It's a CSR activity. Additionally, X Limited arranges meals for poor children with an objective of Eradicating malnutrition. It's CSR activity. The second in the list is any activity for promoting education, including special education and employment enhancing vocation skills, especially among children, women, elderly, and the differently abled, and other livelihood enhancement projects. So the simple example, X Limited constructs a school and runs it. It's a CSR activity. X Limited can also give donation to a trust or foundation, which runs education's institutions. The third one is promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans. So, it's pretty straight. X Limited starts an orphanage. It's CSR activity. The fourth is setting up old age homes, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens and measures for reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically backward groups. The fifth category is ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural resources, and maintaining quality of soil, air and water. For example, X Limited installs a waste treatment plant in a village. It's CSR activity. Plantation activity shall also be covered. However, for a company in the agriculture business, plantation may not qualify as CSR. The sixth is protection of national heritage, art and culture including restoration of buildings and sites of historical importance, and works of art. Setting up public libraries. Promotion and development of traditional arts and handicrafts. The seventh activity in the list is measures for the benefit of armed forces veterans, war widows and their dependents. The eighth activity is training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Paralympic sports and Olympic sports. The ninth option of CSR activity is contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, or any other fund set up by the central government, for socio-economic development, and relief and welfare of the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, other backward classes, minorities and women. So, if the company is not able to undertake any CSR activity by itself, it can give donation to any such fund. The second last activity is contributions or funds provided to technology incubators located within academic institutions which are approved by the central government. The last one in the list, rural development projects. So, X Limited get a housing project constructed in the rural area. It's CSR activity. Clarification provided by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, by its circular dated 18th of June 2014, provided certain clarifications with regard to CSR-related provisions. Now we would discuss a brief of that. The first clarification of MCA. The entries of various activities, mentioned in the Schedule 7, should be interpreted liberally. Liberal interpretation means an interpretation which has broader coverage, or more inclusive application of statutory concepts. In this regard, the Ministry said that the items listed in the Schedule 7 are broad-based. The circular also has an annexure, which provides clarifications with regard to various activities, whether to qualify as CSR activity or not. Now, we would discuss them, one by one. So, promotion of road safety shall be covered under the CSR activity of promoting education. Drivers training will be covered under vocational skills and be treated as CSR activity. Similarly, safety traffic engineering and awareness through print, audio and visual media should be regarded as CSR activity, as part of promoting education, giving medical and legal aid. Treatment to road accident victim would be CSR activity, as the same will be covered under promoting health care, including preventive health care activity, relating to provisions for aids and appliances to the differently able person, would be covered under promoting health care, including preventive health care. On a given case, wherein a company was proposing to set up an applied research training and innovation center to undertake certain activities, the ministry clarified for each activity. The clarifications are: activity for capacity building for farmers covering best sustainable farm management practices would be CSR activity, covered under Vocational Skill Livelihood Enhancement Project. Then, training agricultural labor on skill development would be regarded as vocational skill development. With regard to the activity of doing the own research on the field for individual crops, to find out the most cost-optimum and agri-ecological sustainable farm practices, with a focus on water management, the ministry clarified that it's part of the ecological balance maintaining quality of soil, air and water. For the activity to do product life cycle analysis from the soil conservation point of view, the MCA clarified that the same would be covered under the conservation of resources and maintaining quality of soil, air and water. Consumer education and awareness can be covered under Schedule 7, as promoting education. With respect to the donation to the Indian Institute of Management for conservation of building, renovation of classroom, the MCA clarified that the conservation and renovation of school building and classroom relates to CSR activity under promoting education. Ministry also clarified that setting up a non-academic techno park would be regarded as CSR activity if such park is approved by the Department of Science and Technology. With regard to the disaster relief, the ministry clarified that it could be covered under the range of CSR activities, such as medical aid as promoting health care, supplying food as eradicating hunger, and supplying clean water under sanitation and making available safe drinking water. Then, setting up trauma care centers around highways, in case of road accidents, shall be covered as CSR activity under health care. With regard to rural development project, the MCA clarified that any project meant for the development of rural India will be covered under this. Ministry also clarified that supplementing government schemes like midday meal would be covered under eradicating poverty and malnutrition. Activity pertaining to research and studies in any area specified in Schedule 7, the MCA clarified that it would be covered under otherwise promoting education. For slum redevelopment or housing of economic weaker section, the ministry clarified that it's a CSR activity covered under measures for reducing inequality. The ministry also clarified that renewable energy project would be covered as CSR activity under environment sustainability. However, in the clarifications, the MCA clarified that certain activities will not be regarded as CSR activity. So, as per the clarification, training to enforcement persons is not CSR activity. Capacity building of government officials and elected representatives, both in the area of public-private partnership and urban infrastructure, will not be regarded as CSR activity. Building sustainable urban development and urban public transport system will not be a CSR activity. On a specific note, MCA clarified that the United States-India Physician Exchange Program will not be treated as CSR activity. The ministry also clarified that one-off events, such as marathons, awards, charitable contributions, sponsorship of TV programs, will not qualify as CSR activity. Also, any expense incurred by the companies for compliance under laws, such as labor laws, Land Acquisition Act, will not be part of CSR program. Other clarifications: salaries paid to regular CSR staff or volunteers will be factored under CSR cost and be part of the CSR activity. Expenses incurred by the foreign holding company for CSR activity in India would qualify as CSR spending for Indian subsidiary, if such expenditure is routed through that Indian subsidiary. For CSR activities, registered trusts would include those trusts which are registered under the Income Tax Act, if the respective state law doesn't provide the framework for trust registration. Contribution to the corpus of any trust, society or Section 8 company would qualify as CSR activity, if such trust, society or Section 8 company is created exclusively for undertaking CSR activity, which is directly covered under the Schedule 7. For conclusion, we can say that mandatory CSR is relatively a new concept to India. Large corporates have their own setup for CSR activity. They have been carrying out certain activities voluntarily, even before CSR became mandatory. However, for mid-sized companies, it would be a challenge to itself indulge in the activity. They may have to comply by giving the donations to eligible institutions. For some companies, it may be a mere statutory obligation to comply. Some may seriously indulge in good work. With the obligation of spending 2% of average profit every year, definitely, CSR pool of the country would be larger. Now, we have to see, is there is a meaningful use of this pool. This is the end of the presentation. Thanks for watching. For further study-related supports, please visit csstudents.com.